Hello, Adrian Swinscoe. I'm so happy you're here on the Doing CX Right show.
Hi, Stacy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Well, I was the lucky candidate to be among many others on your show. And so it's only fair that I now, as a host, have you come to my platform to really showcase such incredible wisdom and a unique view on CX, which is what I love about you. So let's start off with telling my audience, who are you? What do you do professionally?
So my name's Adrian Swinscoe. I guess I'm an expatriate Scot living on the south coast of England with my wife, Hannah. And we're currently situated in an office here in kind of Brighton. We can look out that window there and we can see the sea down at the bottom of the hill. So that's where we're at. And what do I do is I guess I do a number of things, but they fall into sort of two broad buckets. One is that I do advisory work with organizations that serve customers, different sort of brands, different sort of organizations, help them tackle different problems about how to deliver better service or better experience to their customers. And on the flip side of that, I do a lot of writing and research and sort of talking and I guess advocacy for better outcomes. And the sort of two things feed each other. So you get the practical with the theoretical, or the kind of future with the now, and it all kind of like helps each other.
Why? Why do you spend your precious hours and days on this topic?
Because I don't like bad service. And it frustrates me that in many situations, organizations are the ones that tend to get in the way of their people doing a good job. And it's kind of that's the thing that's always frustrated me. I have been involved in things and built things there which had, if you like, a customer and an employee value proposition at their heart. I believe that if you give people the right sort of tools and create the right sort of environment, they can do amazing kind of things on both sides. And so it's always frustrated me that the achievement of decent service is not necessarily that hard. We sometimes get in our own way. But I know there's not just the one answer to that. And hence about 12 or so years ago, I started, after doing a bunch of different things, started just exploring it, just looking for clues about how we can produce these better outcomes. And have been able to develop, I guess, a footprint, a voice, some sort of impact, I guess, on some of the things that go on. And I've, I have my own blog, I have a Forbes column, I've had a podcast for the last 10 years. I've written sort of 3 books. I've got a 4th one coming out sort of towards the end of this year. So yeah, I'm trying to just advocate for better outcomes, invite people to do better work, agitate for change, expand people's thinking, encourage them to do different and better things.
What's one fun fact that people may not know about you?
I used to be able to speak really good Arabic.
I did not know that.
You wanted one thing that people didn't know.
Yeah, I like that. Now, one other quick thing that could be obvious to people, but it does inspire me because it differentiates you a bit too, is this whole punk theme.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate for 1 minute on that?
Sure. I mean, so the punk thing is, so about 2-3 years ago, I was reflecting on the whole experience space with a friend of mine, and over a couple of beers, Guinness actually. And whilst we were both sort of excited by the idea that there was so much investment or activity and enthusiasm about the space, I was sort of bemoaning the lack of significant improvement. And I, in a moment of sort of frustration, I said, I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk. And when I thought about that a bit more, it made me think about punk music, because I'm a fan of punk music. And it made me think about where punk came from. And punk exploded out the back of progressive rock in the 1970s. Now, whilst many people like progressive rock, it was also accused of being, overly indulgent, self-obsessed, overly elaborate, all these different things. And punk took a very much a DIY, democratic, back to basics approach. It was all like heart and emotion. And it made me think that actually what was interesting is that the whole experience space was exploding and starting to take on some of the same characteristics as the prog rock space in the 1970s. And it's becoming overly elaborate, certified, codified, benchmarked, metriced, yada, 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 the whole sort of thing. And in danger of disappearing up its own backside, if you like. And becoming more interested in itself than its constituents, i.e. its customers, and who it's there to serve. And I thought, well, if that's true, then my hypothesis was, well, if that's true, then what would a punk version look like? And that's why I started to explore this idea of punk CX. And it's not about producing an answer. Punk was never an answer. Punk was more of an attitude or a mindset about not being scared to do things differently, and about stripping things back, keeping things simple, swimming against the tide. But it's the thing that, and it's sometimes about taking risks. And so when I wrote the book, I was styled it on an album sort of style. So it's more about composed of a series of tracks. It's very colorful. It's designed like a manifesto in more ways than one. And it's a sort of a punch in the face, really. It said, like, wake up and do better work. And that's the thing about it. That was the whole thing about it. It's like, you might not like it, and that's fine, but you'll definitely notice it.
Yes, I watched the Go-Go's documentary, and to watch that at the age I'm at now versus listening and singing the music when I was younger, the Go-Go's, I did not realize then how much they were ahead of their times and what change agents they were, which is actually very necessary for CX leaders. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember one of my favorite bands is a band called Fugazi, and they have a song called Burning 2, not 2, but T-O-O. And if you listen to the lyrics, they're talking about environmental catastrophe. And this is back in the, late 80s, early 90s. They were like a post-punk sort of band. So not really original punks, but in that post-punk era. And they're from the Washington, D.C. area in the States. And I think it's just brilliant. But some of the stuff that they talk about is just so ahead of its time. And I think that's the thing, is that they are like many forms of music. They're like the news, and sometimes the news that you don't want to hear.
That's good. That's really good. Wow. We could probably spend this whole show just on punk and CX, but let's take it further. So, talking about futuristic, yet it's also now also that blockchain is a hot topic. Is there a link to customer experience and blockchain? Do you see that for the future? Do you see it now? What's your beliefs as we're all learning at the same time?
Sure. I mean, that's something I've written about in the past, and I must tip my hat to Jeremiah Ouyang and his crew about doing some pre-work on this and helping me out on it with their primary research. So I really like blockchain as in terms of distributed ledger technology. I think it's got some fascinating applications and around veracity of records, protecting ownership rights, all of those sort of things. But the thing and I think it can be applied, particularly in the experience space, I think it can be applied to things where things have multiple counterparties involved, and it's quite complex, kind of like arrangements. So we get like loyalty programs, and you have multiple partners that you've got to almost collect rewards through, and you've got to keep track of them, and all those different things. You think that's probably an ideal space where it could fit, in theory. And I know there's some people trialing a lot of these things. But one of the concerns I have about blockchain, and it's, and it's more popular famous, known sort of application like cryptocurrencies, it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, is the amount of energy it takes to process a transaction and to verify a transaction. I mean, and we haven't, the technology hasn't come matured enough, I think, right now to. I have concerns about the kind of the value that a business is going to get from it versus the actual cost of using it, and not just the cost in terms of the energy cost, but the environmental cost. Because this sort of technology, because of the way it's structured, it consumes an inordinate amount of energy. Let me give you an example. This might blow your mind. It blew my mind when I heard it. And this is not directly applicable, but it's like a Bitcoin type of comparison. And somebody told me that one Bitcoin transaction, the amount of energy it takes to produce one Bitcoin transaction, is the equivalent to 750,000 swipes of a Visa card.
That is very thought-provoking. I'd not heard that.
And so you end up with this equation, right? Which goes, oh, that's really interesting, but at what cost?
Yes.
And given that experience is developing into this thing, which is not just about customers and it's not just about employees, but it's about society and stakeholders and so on and so forth. It's like a whole thing, right? We can't ignore different parties. Then we have to factor that into our thinking, because if we don't, we're either just ignoring these issues because we're playing short term. Well, we just don't know right now. So I think there will be a solution to it. I think we'll come up with a more energy efficient way of doing this, of handling it. But right now, I'm a bit skeptical about whether about the value equation in that whole thing.
What about loyalty programs? I mean, there's so many of them and they've been around a long time. Do you see Bitcoin being part of those kind of marketing initiatives?
I mean, maybe, but I'm a little bit reticent about loyalty programs, full stop, because I've seen research that shows that, and it sort of makes sense, really. I've seen research that shows that, like 90% of all loyalty is delivered by like 2 points on a customer's journey. And it's about how good you are at the whole buying experience and what happens when something goes wrong. And if you think about it psychologically, that makes a lot of sense. We want to feel good and feel right and be comforted and all that sort of stuff in terms of when we're spending our hard-earned cash. And then when something goes wrong, we want somebody to come in and save us and make it okay, or to solve the problem. We understand that things go wrong, but we want things to get solved kind of right. Now, if you get both of those things right, apparently it takes care of about 90% of all loyalty. So the question is, the loyalty programs are then really focused on like the 10% of the margin. So here's the question. Would you be better suited taking some of the money or the resources that you're putting into your loyalty program and looping it into initiatives around improving the buying experience and or the service you deliver to your customers? Would you get a better ROI from that rather than just the loyalty program? Because if you're not great at this and this, but you're spending heavily on that, I'm not sure the economics of that stack up.
Yes, agree. It is very, very true, and something that we don't think enough about as we do campaigns. I agree.
I mean,
What
that's not to say that
about,
there's some good loyalty programs out there that offer real
yes,
value to people. And that I'm 100% behind that. I'm just trying to take a bit more of a macro, systemic, connected kind of view about it, and sort of questioning, should we put our money here or here or here?
Right. But I also wonder, not but, and I also wonder, how will Bitcoin and all these new technologies, if that's the right name for it, how will they come into play to motivate or pull customers? Will it?
Well, I mean, I feel like the $64 million question, or if, maybe, if dollars still exist at that point in time.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not sure about cryptocurrencies and where it's all going to go. It's not my area of sort of expertise, but I do know that, and I have spotted that a lot of the big central banks are starting to make moves into developing their own cryptocurrencies. And that makes sense. I mean, it's almost a bit like, why would you let yourself get disaggregated out of the whole process? You're a bank, right? What are you doing? You're waiting for Christmas? It's a bit like being a turkey, or are you trying to get in on the act? And because they're almost like fighting for their own sort of future and the financial system as we currently know it. But so I don't know how it's all going to play, but I think it will play a role. I just don't know what that role will be and how significant it will be right now. But they're definitely technologies to watch.
Yes. And I think as we are all focused on making a lower level of effort for customers to buy, to get their products, to pay their bill, I have to believe that that's going to contribute to making it easier to a whole nother level, if it goes as we suspect.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, I think it's also about the idea of what easy is will end up evolving as well.
I like that. Yes. Yes. So let's talk about also, you've written several books. One of them, actually, I want to dive into for a moment because it still continues, even though you wrote it a little while ago. It's still really, really relevant, which is about how to wow.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? How to wow? And what is your favorite tactic for people that they may not even be thinking about?
Crumbs. So the first question is easier than the second one because it's a long time since I actually wrote that. Yeah. So How to I I really enjoyed writing it. It was the first. Well, I published it through Pearson, so it was nice to get published by a big brand, as it were, and that sort of ticked a box, and it did really well, and it's like a standard business book. Looks like that. And the interesting thing about it is it's called How to Wow, but it's not really about wow services. Maybe it's commonly thought, because I actually think wow service is not necessarily what you think it is. Because many people talk about wow service, and it's like we're all magpies, right? We're all sort of like distracted by shiny objects, like, oh, look at this, and oh, look at that. But actually, and this is backed up by sort of neuroscientific research, is that we would be better suited if we focused on eliminating the disappointment, risk, uncertainty, failure, all those different things, because I feel like the memory or psychological ROI on that is between 5 and 7 or 5 and 12 times greater than the ROI on any sort of joy, surprise, or delight factor. And the reason behind that is because it's our survival instinct, right? And also the fact that there's also this idea to do with kind of rumination, in that things that we associate with negative emotions, disappointment and risk, uncertainty, all this type of loss, all this sadness, all these sort of things, we remember them for way, way longer than we do in any other sort of like really nice things. It's just the way that we're wired. And if you apply that to kind of business, then it means that we should then look at how do we not just get distracted by the nice things, but actually how do we pay attention to eliminating all the kind of the stuff that we might not like. And actually, because many people don't do that, but if you did that, then you end up putting yourself on a higher level than anybody else, because you become dependable and trusted and reliable. And it gives you that platform upon which to build other sort of things. And therefore, when you do make a mistake up here, but because you've all got this solid base on it, people are much, much more forgiving. And the problem is, if we get distracted because everybody wants to do these things up here, but not this things down there, because these things are hard work and take time and commitment and discipline. And you've got to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, right? And that's what I mean. Is sometimes you can be boring, but still produce wow service, because you're just doing the things that matter when they matter.
Yeah. So, what's an example in your mind of a company that is what I say doing CX right in the way of wow service?
I'll pick a famous one because I want to do a shout out to their CEO who passed away late last year, and that's Tony Hsieh at Zappos. And the reason why I want to pick those out is, well, Zappos are legendary, and I've visited them, and I know some people over there. And I think one of the things that they do which is just counter what many other organizations do, is that they want to speak to people on the phone. It's not about rushing people off the phone. They want to speak to people on the phone because they want to make that connection with people. And so while they might measure how long calls on average are lasting, they're not sweating people to get off the phone. So it doesn't feel like a rush. It's just all very natural. They're actually fascinatingly disappointed when their number of phone calls goes down and people start to use more and more digital channels, because they get frustrated that it doesn't give them the opportunity to develop those connections that they like to develop, but they're always there. And I think it just tells you a bit about them. They're not trying to force things through. They're just being there for people.
Mm.
Because they're not trying to, if you like, manage it to death, as it were. They end up equipping their people and then trusting their people. They end up producing these great outcomes. And and they did it from their inception, took off, huge growth. And then Amazon went and bought them, and then they bought them and then they left them alone because they wanted to learn from them as well, because there was stuff that they could learn from them because it's so different. And they continue to experiment to this day, long after, Tony left the business. They continue to experiment, but he was there right at the start. He was probably one of the original punks when it comes to service and experience. He did have a Mohican from time to time. And I mean, may he rest in peace. He is missed.
Yes. Well, with minutes left, this went too fast. You have another book, more recent, Punk CX. Can you share the highlights? What is that about?
So I have some pictures kind of like behind me, which is some of the sample of the artwork from the book. And I'll pick one, which is, I think, that one. You see that there?
I can, but those listening to it won't.
So I'll tell you what I'll describe it. It's like a green frame with a white center, and it has a series of letters in it, and it's DWYS YAGTD WYSYY. Agtdi. Now, I say to people, it's not a town in Wales. And if you're Welsh, you'll get that. But actually, I guess it's an acronym. And it's an acronym that stands for do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And I think it's just a fundamental of things, individual, personal, business, behavior. If we did that, we did that more often, made those kind of like those promises, built those relationships, built on that sort of understanding, then I think we wouldn't go far wrong.
Well, that might be your answer to the next question I have. You can tell me, which is if I had a ton of CEOs and leaders, entrepreneurs in my room right now, what's the one thing you want them to know? Would that be it?
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't want them to, I would want them to, I don't want them to know something. I want them to do something that will help them know something.
Okay.
And what I want them to do is I want them to go and serve their customers. I want them to go and work on the front line, whatever that means. It means if you jump in a van and you deliver something, or you sit in a contact center and you get trained up and you understand how to answer the phones, or you, I don't know, do something else, whatever it might be. You can take a shift in a shop, whatever it might be. There's this idea that we can talk about the experience of people that serve customers and how important it is. But until we actually really experience what it's like, only then will we really understand what it's like and what we really need to do to make it better.
Beautifully said. Final question. If you could go back in time to 20-year-old Adrian, based on what you know now that you didn't know then, what would you say?
Oh, crumbs. Don't worry, life's an adventure.
Don't worry, life's an adventure. It sure is. The don't worry part, I think, is the hardest thing for all of us.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, maybe I would take an eraser and I would kind of rub out the don't worry bit. I just go, life's an adventure. Full stop.
Love it. I love it. Well, I know people are going to want to find you and your books, which I'll put in the show notes. What is the best place to reach you?
Best place is probably just my website, and so it's my name is Adrian Swinscoe, so it's ADrianswinscoe.com, all one word, and you'll find my podcast, the stuff I've written about, my books, the work that I do, my phone number, my email. It's all there. So if you want to find out a bit more, then feel free to drop me a note and say hi.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. Like I said, I love your diverse views, and that's what makes you special. So I appreciate you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Stacy. It was an absolute pleasure.